Story of the arcade game, Airwolf. Airwolf is a helicopter-based arcade game that was released in 1987 by a Japanese company called Hugo. It was based on the popular TV series Airwolf, which aired from 1984 to 1987. The show was a mix of action, adventure, and military drama, revolving around a high-tech helicopter called Airwolf, designed for advanced combat missions. The arcade game follows the same theme, placing players in control of this futuristic and powerful helicopter as they embark on challenging missions, fighting enemies and rescuing hostages. The background of the TV series. To understand the game, it's essential to recognize that the Airwolf TV series provided the core inspiration. In the show, Airwolf is a supersonic, armed helicopter with advanced capabilities. It was built by a secret government agency, but was later stolen by its test pilot, Stringfellow Hawk. He uses the helicopter to work for a covert agency called The Firm, while also trying to locate his brother, who went missing in action during the Vietnam War. Hawk is a loner, often reluctant to work for The Firm, but motivated by the desire to reunite with his brother. The Airwolf TV show attracted a lot of attention due to its blend of fast-paced aerial combat scenes, action-packed missions, and emotional depth, primarily centered around Hawk's search for his brother. This mix of elements lent itself well to an arcade game adaptation, where the high-stakes aerial combat could be emphasized. The gameplay. The Airwolf arcade game puts players in the cockpit of the titular helicopter, Airwolf, where they must complete a variety of missions. Each level in the game is mission-based and typically involves rescuing hostages while battling enemy forces. Controls and play style. Players control the helicopter, navigating it through horizontally scrolling levels while dodging enemy fire and returning fire with Airwolf's weapons. The helicopter is equipped with machine guns and missiles, which are used to destroy enemy aircraft, tanks, and other combat vehicles. The game's controls are simple but require skill and strategy. Players must balance between offensive and defensive maneuvers to survive waves of enemies. The scrolling nature of the game means the player needs to keep moving while staying alert for incoming threats from the ground and the air. The game also has an element of strategy, as you need to plan the rescue of hostages. You have to fly the helicopter to specific points on the map, where the hostages are being held. Once they are picked up, the player must transport them to safety. All of this happens while enemy forces try to stop you, adding an intense sense of urgency to the missions. The missions increase in difficulty as the game progresses. Enemies become tougher, and the environments become more dangerous. The player's reflexes and decision-making skills are continuously tested as they advance through the game. The game also introduced a points system, where defeating enemies and successfully rescuing hostages earns players points that contribute to high scores. Graphics and sound. For its time, Airwolf had decent graphics and sound that captured the feel of the TV series. The helicopter is detailed enough for players to recognize the iconic Airwolf design, and the enemies are distinguishable, although the graphical fidelity is limited by the technology of the time. The sound effects also contribute to the immersion, with explosive sound effects and gunfire adding intensity to the gameplay. While the game didn't feature much in the way of voice acting or advanced audio features, it did have a strong arcade atmosphere. The music plays in the background, helping to set the tone for each mission and keeping players engaged during gameplay. Challenge and replay value. Airwolf is considered a challenging arcade game. The difficulty ramps up with each level, making it increasingly hard to progress without mastering the controls and timing. The game requires players to not only shoot enemies, but also avoid being hit themselves, which adds a layer of complexity. Furthermore, rescuing hostages while under fire adds another element of tension and challenge to the game. One of the reasons the game was popular in arcades is due to its challenge. Like many arcade games of the 1980s, Airwolf was designed to be difficult so that players would keep inserting coins to continue playing. This high level of difficulty encouraged players to improve their skills and try to achieve higher scores, which in turn added to the replay value. The variety of missions and enemy types also kept the gameplay from becoming repetitive. Even though the objectives, destroying enemies and rescuing hostages, remained consistent, the escalating difficulty and changing environments kept players on their toes. It was the type of game that arcade-goers could play repeatedly, trying to beat their previous high scores or survive just a little bit longer. The legacy of Airwolf. While Airwolf, the arcade game, didn't achieve the same level of cultural impact as other classic arcade games of the 1980s, it did have a dedicated fan base, particularly among fans of the TV series. The game captured the core elements of the Airwolf series: the intense aerial combat, the advanced helicopter technology, and the high-stakes missions. It was a fun and challenging experience for players who enjoyed action-packed arcade games with a military theme. The game's simple controls and focus on skill-based gameplay were typical of the arcade games from that era, but the connection to a popular TV series gave it an extra boost in terms of popularity. Players who enjoyed the TV series could jump into the game and take control of the iconic helicopter, providing them with an interactive way to experience the world of Airwolf. Though the game didn't spawn a long series of sequels, its impact remains in the history of arcade gaming. Fans of retro games and arcade enthusiasts still recognize Airwolf as a solid example of a licensed arcade game done right. The game also set the stage for other helicopter-based action games that came out in the late 1980s and early 1990s. Release date and availability. Airwolf was first released in arcades in 1987, during the peak of the arcade gaming craze. It came out in Japan initially and was later available in other regions. The game was popular in arcades, where players could try their hand at flying the advanced helicopter and completing its challenging missions. Although it never received a wide home console release, the game has remained in the memories of retro gaming fans. Today, Airwolf can be experienced through arcade emulators or by finding a physical arcade cabinet in a retro arcade. Its place in arcade history is cemented as a challenging, action-packed game that took full advantage of its TV show source material to offer an engaging and fun gaming experience. Conclusion. In summary, Airwolf was a challenging arcade game that capitalized on the popularity of the Airwolf TV show. With its focus on helicopter combat, hostage rescues, and increasing difficulty, it provided players with a fast-paced and strategic gameplay experience. Released in 1987 by Hugo, the game became a fan favorite in the arcade scene, despite not having the same lasting fame as other arcade classics. The game's legacy lives on among retro gaming fans who appreciate its difficulty, skill-based gameplay, and connection to a beloved 80s TV show. If you liked the video, subscribe, like, and write to me in the comments, what do you want to be the next arcade game that we will learn the story of? Until next time, be well.